All right, welcome everyone then. Thank you for joining us today. This is the third part of our webinar series on negotiation skills for lawyers. And we're quite excited to have so many of you again from all over the world joining us for today's session. You have the chat on the right-hand side if you click on it. So any questions that you might have throughout the talk, or even that you want to keep to remind yourself for asking them after for the Q&A session, feel free to type them into there. You will hopefully have found the setting on the screen where you can navigate of how much you see of our presentation and how much you see of everyone else's videos. So you can also toggle that around and draw one window larger and the other one smaller. Can everyone see the presentation? Can I get a quick thumbs up in the chat? Everyone can see here. Actual video thumbs up, fantastic. All right, then there isn't much else for me to do than to do a quick introduction. Those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Claudia. I'm a lawyer from Austria, but many years ago, well, now everything feels like many years ago, but actually 6 years ago, I started working as a full-time negotiation trainer after my Harvard Law LLM degree. That led me to realize there's so much more skill in being an effective negotiator and actually communicating effectively with people and convincing people than I thought anyone has ever taught us, at least in European law schools and in Asian law schools. So I decided that I'd have to take that job up myself, quit being a professor and a lawyer, and started working with law firms around the world on negotiation skills. And today we're going to have Svetlana Kalitson, my new colleague, for the webinar. She's going to introduce herself in a moment, and I'm very excited because today she's going to talk about how do we negotiate the best price. So for those of you who followed our series, we've already talked about how to be an interest-based negotiator, how to be a win-win negotiator, but inevitably there is a bargaining component to many negotiations that we will run. So that's what we're going to dive in today with Svetlana. So she'll have a 30 to 45 minute presentation, I believe, for you, and then we'll open it up for questions and discuss everything that's come up and everything that might be of further interest to you. With that, I'm already happy to hand over. Svetlana, do you want to take it from here with an unmuted version?
Hi, can you hear me?
Fantastic.
Oh, great. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm very happy to have you all here. Thank you for the opportunity to spend some hour with you. My name is Veronica. I'm originally from Ukraine and I'm a lawyer from Austria. And in the year of 2015, I had a very big aha experience when I was representing victims in a very big case. It was a criminal case on torture, murder, what a very, very harsh case and so on. And there was like a very big case in Austria. Very important lawyers were representing the other parties. And I remember that we were about to win the case, but in the end we lost the case. And I realized that it was very important to bring the knowledge, and also it's not that important, and it's not enough to be the best lawyer, to have the best education, but it's very important to communicate everything that you present in the law firm, in a law case before the court. So therefore, since then, I'm on the mission, and therefore I'm also a trainer for negotiation, and I have an honor to talk to you about negotiating the best price. So let's dive into that. And if you remember from our previous webinars, we were talking about the interest-based negotiation and have compared it to the traditional bargaining. And if you remember, the traditional bargaining is things that there is a fixed amount of something, of a value, and then we need to just divide this amount of something, and therefore we bargain. So if I get a bigger piece of pie, in a very easy and simple terms talking here, if I get a bigger pie, a piece of pie, then you get a smaller piece of pie, and a different way around. That's the traditional one. But the interest-based negotiation understands that there is not just 100%. It's not the value that we're talking about. It is usually not fixed, and therefore we ask the open questions. Therefore, we look for the underlying, for the positions, for the look for many offers and different options that we can offer to our counterpart in order to give them a better deal. And therefore, we believe that we grow the pie. So no matter what, in the traditional bargaining and in interest-based negotiation, at some point, as soon as you have the pie, you will need to divide the pie. And this session is going to be how to divide and how to bargain in the best way, because even though you have created a beautiful, big, fantastic pie by the interest-based negotiation, you will need to divide, and you want to claim the bigger value for yourself. So we're talking about the bargaining here. And before we talk the money, there are also important steps to understand and to know. And the first one is actually the timing, because it's important to talk about them, to know when you talk about the money. And many people often just jump into with a number, and it's not that good, because just jump in with a number is like asking someone to marry you on the first date. So it's not the time yet. It's also important to know what numbers do you need to prepare. Sometimes you prepare one number, maybe two, but there are more to that, and I will be explaining to you that in a short time. Then it's also important to know, shall you go first or shall you go second? There are some experts saying you should never go first. You should wait until someone gives you an offer, makes you an offer, and then you decline it, and then you go back and forth. So others say you should go first, and we will be talking about that too. If you decided to go first, then it's also important to know how high should you start. And in the end, as soon as you have an offer, you will need to bargain again around this price, and in order to get to the best price that you can get. So talking about timing, it's very important preparation. Preparation is mother of everything, and we would like to advise you to prepare before you go into negotiation, because then you will have the better foot in front. The importance of the chit chat is also a very funny story. To be honest, I always thought like a chit chat is a small talk, it's a very small, but no, studies show that the chit chat is very much comparable to the results that you have. That means that every minute that you spend on the chit chat and talking on non-deal related matters translate exactly into your deal. So it tells you how good deal you will get. So before you go into negotiation, you prepare, and then you arrive early. You talk about, I don't know, sports. Have a small talk about personal, maybe non-personal. Some people don't like to speak about their kids and families, so you don't need to do that. You can talk about the deals that you have reached before. Maybe you have read something in the newspapers, weather or something, but invest this time to create a rapport with the person, and also to create the trust, because trusting experience will give you more. Then there is a part where we exchange information. And if you remember from the previous webinars, we were talking about this iceberg, about the positions and also the interests. And to get to the interest, to dive into the interest and create the multiple options that we are going to divide here, we need to exchange information. So therefore, that's the time to tell your counterpart why you are here, what matters to you, to find out what matters to them, to see whether the interests that you have assumed before the negotiation are correct and right. And this is the time where you get the information. And after that, you get to the bargaining part. And this is where the whole fun starts. So brace yourself. There are some numbers to prepare, and I have 3 numbers to tell you about. And the first number is the reservation price, or the bottom line. For the seller is it's the lower price, and for the buyer it's the higher price. It's the highest price that the buyer can go, and it's the lowest price that the seller can go. And as you see here, there is a fancy abbreviation called BATNA. It's short for Best Alternative to Negotiating Agreement. That means the Plan B. Your reservation price has got to be the same that the Plan B. If you don't reach an agreement here and this specific negotiation, you've got to have a Plan B to fall on, and this also creates your reservation price. And the second price is your goal or the target price. That's the price that you think that you might get for your product. If you're selling, that's also very important part as for the buyers. And between those prices, there is a first step that we need to think about, and that's the focus. Our focus somehow always goes to the reservation price, because that's the barometer. That's the yes or no situation here. It's the decision of the yes and no. So if you get around the reservation price, usually we are very focused and pushy, and the concentration is very high. But as soon as you get into the yes direction, we usually tend to relax a little bit more, to be less pushy. The power goes a little bit away, and the counterpart, if they pay close attention, and they usually do, if it's about money, they will see that and they will negotiate in a different way. So just think about it, that you need the reservation price, but have it somewhere in the back of your mind, like that's the limit. But focus on the goal price, because the goal or the target price is usually higher and better for you. So that's the advice. And the third number that would be great to prepare, or you've got to prepare, is the opening price. That's the last but not least and very important one, and it's very underestimated one. So, and before we go into the opening price, I would like to make an exercise with you, really short. And I have a question to you. What do you think is the population of Uzbekistan? Is it more or less than 4 million? Just think about it. Try not to Google, or best not to Google directly right now. Just think about it. Is it more or less of 4 million? And you will get also, and there is another question. What do you think is the population of Uzbekistan? You will get a poll right now in front of you, and just
No Googling, just guess and type in your first answer. We're not sending this to your high school teacher. They're not taking away your degree. Okay, polls are running. We've got 75% of people. A couple more. Everyone needs to have an opinion on this.
We're not going to give you grades or something. It's anonym.
We're not going to tell you either if not everyone has voted. 5 people left.
Drum roll.
Drum roll. Everyone who hasn't answered yet is probably still Googling. So I'm gonna end it here. I'm gonna show you what just happened. Can you see?
Can you see that? So the results are between 1 and 5 million have voted for 32%. The bigger amount is 43%, has voted for between 6 and 10 million. And we have more than 20 million for 21%, interesting. And a very small percentage has voted for 11 till 20 million. So thank you very much for the participation. I have also got the numbers here, and the answer is that we have asked this question to many groups, to many different people, to many cultures and so on, and most of them have voted between 0 and 10 million, and the answer is it's actually the population is 30 million. Thank you for answering that. And I will tell you what happened here. I have just anchored you. And that's the trick that our brain is doing with all of us. And the thing is actually that as soon as there is a number in the room and there is no connection to that, your brain will still be fixed on that kind of number, and therefore you will estimate and therefore also negotiate around this number. So it is very important to know which number goes first, what is your opening offer, and what number you talk about as a first. So, and there are many studies on that, on the anchoring effect, and one of the very interesting ones is actually from the MIT University, where most logical people have been asked to pull out their social security cards, to write down the two last digits from the security card somewhere in the paper and put it away. And the second part of the exercise was to bid on a product. So they would be bidding on a glass of water, on a phone, or on a pan or bar of a chocolate or something, just very small items. And after that, they have compared the results of the bidding results and also the numbers of the security numbers. And there is no connection to that. It's a random number. And they found out that those who have had the highest numbers from the security card have placed the higher bids by 140 to 170%. And that's the power of the anchoring. It's very powerful. It's there. You cannot say no to that, and it's very quick. So our brain just functions like that, and we all are wired this way. So very important to know about the anchoring effect, that before you go into negotiation, you really need to know the market, and you really need to know your opening price, because if you don't have sufficient information, you might anchor it wrong. Therefore, we would advise you to use it if you have sufficient information. So therefore, the research is very important. But if you don't have the sufficient information, if you're new to the field where you're negotiating with, if you have never dealt with lawyers or merchandising companies, whatever that is that you're negotiating with, then it's better to not place the first offer, and also guard yourself against the anchoring effect. And there is only one suggestion that can save you from anchoring, and this is the preparation and also the research. So if you know the market value of the car, and the seller would try to sell it to you for 20,000 euros instead of 10, then you will be alerted already. Very important. So, and therefore, I would also like to show to you the different numbers on this graph from the seller's perspective. Imagine that you're a seller and you would like to sell this beautiful house in Tuscany, Italy, and you have done the research and you have realized that this house can go away for the price of 40 million. This is your reservation price. This is the lowest you can go, and this is the lowest. This is the deal that you can get if you don't here, for example. But you think as a seller that you would like to reach a better deal, and therefore you have another price, and this is the goal price, and it's at 68,000 euros, millions. So the reservation price and the goal price, those are very important. But you also know that there is a negotiation and bargaining part, and therefore you know that the opening price has got to be higher than your goal. And you would like to start with 85 millions. That's the seller's perspective. The buyer's perspective is a little bit different, and it comes from a different way. So the buyer has checked his bank account and realized that he can pay no more than 60 millions for this house. That's the reservation price. That's the value that he can go. He cannot go further. This is the barometer. Like this way, it's still a deal. This way, no deal. But he really thinks that there are so many expenses to the house and so on. You need to pay taxes, and he wants to pay less. So the buyer also have a goal price, and that would be at 40 million. And because he also knows, and also maybe listened to the Negotiation Academy and this webinar, he maybe also knows that there is another price, that he's got to have an opening price that is lower than his goal price in order to reach that and to have some wiggle room for that. So as you see, there are different ways to come into negotiations depending on the perspective of the counterparts. And now let's put them together in a negotiation we have now the buyer with the reservation price. He cannot pay no more than 60. And then we have a seller who is not willing to accept less than 40. And as you see, there is an overlapping, and this is called zone of possible agreement. We have shortened it here. Zone of possible agreement is the holy grail of the negotiation. If you get into the bargaining phase, it's very important to know how far your counterpart can go. Unfortunately, we never talk about that. We never know exactly what is the reservation price of our counterpart. And this zone of possible agreement is very important to know, because it makes sense to negotiate only within this zone of possible agreement. If it's more expensive than 60 millions, then the buyer will not be able to pay it. And if it's less expensive than 40 millions, then the seller will not be interested in selling, because he can get another deal somewhere else. So, and at some point, as soon as you are in negotiation and you have realized that there is an opening deal, you want to talk about this opening deal, and you really want to get to a conclusion and also to get to a deal. And there is this specific thing, how to give concessions to each other, how to negotiate around the number and to get to the conclusion. And I have another exercise for you here, which goes like following. Imagine that you want to buy something, you have just placed an opening offer at 1,000 euros, but you know that you can go until but your reservation price is 900. So you have $100 or euros, as you want to believe. You have 100 to spend, and just for the sake of this exercise, you know that there are 4 rounds. So what do you think? Which strategy would be best to spend those $100 in the 4 rounds for the negotiation? How would you spend or give away the $100? Just put it into the number of option A, B, C, D, E, or F into the chat, and I will vocalize it for you, starting from now.
If you don't have the chat window open, you have a box at the bottom of your Zoom that says chat. Just open that, and when you have your answer, just type in a letter. You don't have to justify why, just your gut feeling, what would be the best strategy.
Okay, we have the first results. E, F, E, 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 F, E. So I think the majority goes for E.
Someone's anchored.
A.
Other opinions.
A. Mm-hmm. C. F. A. F. Thank you. So I think yes, B. We actually got all the options here. So therefore, let's go through them and discuss what option sends what message. Oops, excuse me. So the option A, E, but I prefer also C. Okay, let's go through all of them, and then you'll decide afterwards as soon as you have the information. So option A is giving away $25 in every round. What do you think is it looks pretty fair, I would say, and even. It's easy to calculate. But what do you think is the message that you're sending to your partner? The message usually is that ask me for the 5th time and you also get a $25 off. And therefore you send the message that you can ask me more and more, and you can go on and on again, and you can get less money. So that's the message that you might not want to give, because it's a stressful situation. It's somehow pretty hard and tense, the negotiation. Option B is also different, because then you spend $100 in the first 2 rounds, in the very first 2 rounds, and don't give any concessions in the 3rd and the fourth round. This is pretty risky, because you might frustrate your counterpart, they might leave the table because they will feel that you are not working with them. Option C is on the other side. On the other side, also risky because you don't give any concession in the first, second, and the third round, and spend everything by the very last minute and moment. And in the real negotiation, people usually don't get this far because people get frustrated. Then the negotiation partner will think you're not working with them, you don't have anything to give, and therefore they just go somewhere else. So leaving the table is usually the offer here. The option D is spending. In the option D, you would spend everything in the very first offer and will not give anything at all in the last round. So it's more or less like the option B. If you don't have anything to spend, people get frustrated. They will not follow. The option E was very popular here, and I understand why, because you signalize that you give a little bit more and more every single time you asked, but that's not the assumption, and it's not the message that you want to send to your counterpart. Because
I want to ask the audience actually, why is that a problem? Who wants to give it a guess? What's the message you're sending, and why do you not want to send this message? Do you want to type it in or just unmute yourself? Either way.
Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so with E, the issue that might be because then the person will ensure that we go all 4 rounds and get more and more money from me. So I would give away my leverage to a large extent.
Absolutely.
We've got some in the chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
You seem like you're an easy target. They would try to extract more and more. You're seen as willing to give. Some people would say you look kind of desperate if you do that.
Absolutely, because if you go up with your concessions, then the message is actually, yeah, I am really keen to get this deal, and therefore I work harder and harder, and I give you more and more for that. And the last option is actually my favorite, if I may say that, because in this position you give a significant amount of concession in the first round, and then you bit by bit decrease the amount, and therefore you signalize that there is a loop, and the loop is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and there is an end to this conversation and the end to this negotiation and bargaining. And then in the end, when you give in the last round only $10, then you signalize that you've taken my short. I don't have anything more to give to you. There is nothing less on the table, and therefore that's the option that we would suggest for you to use the next time. So thank you for the participation. I would like to sum up what I have told you right now, and this is very important part, the chit chat first. Don't underestimate the time that you invest into the chit chat. Try to connect to the person, try to create trusting relationship. It's all about people, it's never about the problems. Just stay kind, stay nice, and this will come back to you in kind also. It's also important to prepare 3 numbers: the opening price, the goal price, and the reservation price. But don't forget that the reservation, your limit price, is somewhere somewhere in the back of your head. It's hidden, and you try to go for the goal price. And it's very important to go first if you have your numbers. If you don't have the numbers, then give them the opportunity to come to you and offer you the first price. And as soon as you are in this negotiation where you negotiate around the price and making concession, make them work for the concessions, because it is very important for everyone, and also for your negotiation partner, to work for that, because then they will have the feeling that they got it, and it's not just given to them. And you don't want to have the situation where where you go into the room, then you present the price and then just say, okay, thank you, you've got a deal, because then you will have the feeling that you left something on the table. Maybe you got too low or something. So very important, make them work, make them sweat. And every single time you give a concession, wait till they give you a concession too. Therefore, you will work together and will finalize a deal, a good one. So my last word that I have to say before we open the question and answer session is just stay in touch. You have my credentials here to connect on LinkedIn, or maybe send an email. And we still have this coupon on for 20% off for the master negotiation class. Just go to academy.com and you'll get all the information for that. Thank you.
So let's open it up for questions. I know most of you are negotiating on a daily basis, bargaining and negotiating. So what do you think? What's on your mind? What are you going to use? While you're thinking, I actually have a question. How many of you like to make the first offer? If you like to make the first offer, put a yes in the chat now. Or find the cool thing Barbara just found, reaction and thumbs up on the screen. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you. The anchoring is always the problem. I think it's always a trap.
Absolutely.
This is really, I also got anchored by the number of the Uzbekistan in population. It's happening very often in practice.
You like to make the first offer when you negotiate for a price?
It's really a good question. It depends a bit. It maybe I'm hesitant to say always yes or always no. It depends a bit if I'm in a strong position, and maybe if I'm the seller and don't have to sell, but it would be nice to. Yeah. On the other hand, if I'm desperate, it's maybe easier to anchor already. I don't know what your advice would be.
We have too many lawyers on this to get a yes or no answer. Of course, it's going to be an it depends.
Yes.
But really, it does depend. It really depends on how much information you have. If you have a good amount of information, then by all means, do go first, because it gives you a heads up. And that's why I'm asking how many like to do that. We have 4 affirmative yeses on liking to go first, which is not a whole lot many out of over 30 people. And that's the typical feedback that we get. People don't like to put out the first number because we're too afraid that we're going to lock ourselves into some number that ended up not being so good for us after all. Like Svetlana said, if I offer a price and the buyer says, fantastic, let's shake hands on that, you've got a deal, then you probably will realize, maybe I could have gotten slightly more out of that. So most people are hesitant to go in that position. That's why we're saying it really depends on your information. You have to make sure you're not getting a bad deal for yourself by putting out the first number, because then it's really, really powerful.
Also, what about the situation where you put out a number which the other side finds so stupid that it sort of damages the negotiation?
You might get flinched. There is a strategy on that. So if they put a number and someone is reacting like, oh, really? Oh my God, no, or something, then you get flinched. That's a strategy. That's a usual strategy that people are putting in order to get you down, to make you make the concession before they make the concession. And the only thing is to have some objective criteria to back up your number by objective criteria and to explain. It doesn't need to be a very good argument, but if you have any argument that you can back up your offer, if you're offering on your side, then your offer is not too offensive.
That's a good point that Eugenia is putting there. It should not be insulting. And the key thing is to know what is an optimistic first offer, what's an insulting first offer, that very fine line. And that's exactly what Svetlana just explained, that you need to have an objective criteria. As long as you can quote some sort of reason, not your best argument, some version of one of your arguments, some reason why that is a fair number that you're proposing. As long as you're in that zone, you're not offending the other side. They're very, very unlikely to walk out on you. The moment you have no objective criteria anymore whatsoever, then you run into the challenge that Rory mentioned, that you might start out so high that you just offend people and they just walk out. So make sure if you do start high that you have some objective criteria to back up that high number.
I have a question.
Please.
Yes, please.
So, what if there's a situation where you are in a negotiation with, say, for example, a hard negotiator who's refusing to come into your bargaining zone? So, what can you do to sort of break down their hard exterior and bring them into this bargaining zone where you could work out the best deal possible?
Excuse me, but I could hear you hardly. Can you repeat your question again?
Yes. So if you're in a negotiation with, say, a party who's a hard negotiator and it's sticking to his opening price and is refusing to come into your bargaining zone, so how would you sort of like, what tactics could you use to bring them into your bargaining zone to reach like an agreement?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a few tactics, but firstly, if that's a bully, that means that you may not respond in a kind. So stay kind, stay calm, and just ask them to make a reasonable offer. Try not to react too much. It's like don't be emotional in that. Just remind them that give me a good offer, because on the other side, if they don't come into your zone of possible agreement, if you remember in this slide, then there is no reason for you to make the deal. Therefore, if you still stay calm, they usually are also calm because they want in the end to make the deal with you.
Because Ayesha, it's not your personal bargaining zone, it's your joint bargaining zone between you and the other side. So you don't have to make them come into your zone. They may never come into an area where you think, okay, this deal makes sense for me. But that's why it's so important that you set your limit, your maximum. If they started really high and you as the buyer say, I'm not paying a penny more than 100, but they never come below 150, then you know you need to walk out. That's why you need to think about these numbers up front, because then if you haven't thought about where your limits are and that other side goes really hard and just doesn't move and you're just, okay, it looks like I can't get anywhere, so let me just accept after hours and hours their price, then you've paid more than you should have had, because your reservation price should be connected to your best alternative and you should have walked out at that point. So you can try all your tricks, but in the end you both set what the bargaining zone is and you need to know where does your end of it stop.
Thank you.
We have a question here in the chat. I will sum it up. What harm is it can it do to take the first offer? And I will answer to that. It's not a harm, but it signalizes to you that you might have got a better offer. Because if the two parties are prepared to negotiate with each other, then someone goes in and then you get a deal straight away, then it means that negotiating part and the bargaining part has not taken place. Therefore, you did not get to the reservation price of the other part. And just to give you an example, there's been a case, it's been recently in a newspaper, it was not recently, but a case with Beatles, and their manager was negotiating for a record, and in this in the record industry, they got the deal for 7%, I think, which is a very good percentage of the royalties, for 7%. And straight after that, the same person was negotiating with merchandising company for the T-shirts and whatever was the cappies with the Beatles sign and so on. And this manager was so happy with his previous deal, which was fantastic, with 7%. He went into the room and said, we are not taking any deal, any penny less than 10% of royalties. And merchandiser firm has actually shook the hands and said, yes, you've got a deal, big smile on the face. And it was only a few years later and many millions later too, that they realized that in this merchandising industry, that there is typical to get between 20 and 50% of royalties on the deal. So they lost, I believe, like 100 million of pounds on that one deal, and they needed to renegotiate, and they got only to 25% afterwards. and if they would have known that, they might, I don't know, anchor at 60% and get to 40 or something. So that's the difference. Therefore, just don't take the first deal. You know, sometimes people say like, don't never ever take the first deal, because you really need to negotiate. You need to find out. And the opening price is usually very high or very low, depending on a situation.
And even more important, if you don't have the information, don't make the first offer. That was the big mistake of the Beatles manager, because he made the first offer despite not knowing the merchandise industry. So that's the exception of when you should not open. We've got some more questions in the chat, and one of them I thought we might want to go back, Svetlana, to the slide about reservation prices. Where was it? How do I handle it when there's a gap in reservation prices between buyer and seller? So I think we might have to explain quickly again how the reservation prices stand to each other, because of course there will be a huge gap in reservation prices. There should be.
I don't see the question here.
How do I handle when there's a gap in reservation price between buyer and seller? So Mariana, if we look at the slide, then you have that gap between the two reservation prices because it gives you the bargaining, the playground, the area within which you can actually have a deal. So you need to have that area. It doesn't mean there's always one there, but you want that gap. You want to have that playground of where it makes sense for the buyer. Can you get me the yellow dot in, Svetlana? You want to have that yellow area. Optimally, in every negotiation, there should be the SOPA, zone of possible agreement, because only in this yellow zone does it make sense for both the buyer and the seller to come together and make a deal. So if you think about it, it doesn't make sense anywhere outside the reservation price of the buyer, anywhere more expensive than the buyer has set their reservation price. It doesn't make sense for them because there's not more money on their account for this house, for example. And anything less than the reservation price of the seller doesn't make sense for the seller to sell it for less because maybe they have another offer. So only within that yellow area does it make sense for both to come together and make a deal. So you want to have that overlap. You want to have that gap. I'm just realizing if your question had been, what if there is no overlap? Sometimes you will not have an overlap. Say you have a claimant who asks for a couple $1 million for something that's happened, but a defendant is willing to pay nothing or very little, then you will not have an overlapping SOPA. Then you need to start working on your alternatives. Then you may not be able to settle this thing on money. You may have to work on what are the underlying interests and how else can we settle this case, but that's a different story.
I have another question here about, can you explain again why option F is the best option? And I'll go to the next slide here. Can you all see that? I hope. So the thing to look at this option F is very important because the most important thing is the message that you're sending by giving the concessions. And the message in option F is that the negotiation and bargaining part is going to its end. And at the end of the last round, I don't have anything to give to you because I have already given to you a very small percentage, you know? So the loop is smaller, smaller, and smaller. You give 40, 30, 20, and 10. The way there is very important, that you start with a significant number and then make it smaller, smaller, and smaller. And in the end, you will not be counting the cents or something. So it just sends the message that you've got everything that you could out of the deal.
And it's mostly about satisfaction on the other side, because you see in any case you give away $100, but how happy the other side will be with your concessions, how they feel, what the message is that you're communicating to them indirectly by how you time these concessions. That is what makes the difference. Because in option F, the other side will feel like, yes, I've worked that person really hard and they've really given me all they could and I'm really taking their last shirt. I'm such a great negotiator. So it's much more about satisfaction management. Because in no negotiation is there ever an objectively good outcome. Outcomes will always be subjective. You cannot compare very easily in many circumstances what would have been the same deal with another seller. So the satisfaction can come either from the deal that you get in terms of the numbers or from the process. And for you as a negotiator, you always want to have the deal satisfaction. You want to always have a deal that's really great for you. And you want to give the other side the process satisfaction. You want to make the other side feel like they've gotten a really good deal as well. And that's what this concession strategy helps you to do. And you call a mediator if there's a deadlock. Absolutely. Thanks, Abby.
We have another question here. When you are asked by an interviewer, what do you expect in terms of salary? How does the one deal with this question?
And you should be able to answer this by now. Give it a try. What does it depend on if you answer or not?
Maybe someone else wants to help to answer that question. Just write it into the chat. Maybe someone wants to help.
Anyone can chip in. Do you quote a first salary? Yes, no, when? If you're asked. No one dares to give any negotiation advice. You're not legally held to it.
Okay, so let's go to the numbers.
Thanks, Aman. Yeah, I mean that is absolutely true. What does it depend on? If you have an explanation reason to back it up, that's a big part. So if you've got enough information, here it was, if you have sufficient information, if you have done your research, if you know exactly what you can ask in this industry, then you should make the first offer even before they ask you. Don't let yourself be put in the defense. You can already go in and say, and based on my experience and what I bring to this job, I would see myself earning between 60 to 70K. So put it out there. The only reason why you would not, because you're anchoring, right? Every time you have information, put it out because you will anchor. The only time when you would not do that is if you have absolutely no clue what you should ask for and you're risking that you're actually asking for less than they would have offered you. But you shouldn't be in that situation, because if you're in a salary negotiation, you better have that researched. You better have called up everyone you know and their granddad and their grand aunt to ask where do you think I should go with this? What's the industry? You should have been on the internet. You should have been on every platform, talked to every recruiter and found out about this number.
And I think it's very important thing, in addition to what Claudia has just said, very important to have the 3 different numbers, because sometimes if we go in a negotiation, we definitely know what we earn right now. So that's more or less the BATNA, or actually the reservation, because I don't want to go less than that. Then I maybe want to earn 5,000 more or something. But it's very important to know that the opening price has got to be bigger to have a wiggle room to get to your goal price. Very important, just the different numbers.
I think while we're at this, we're also answering Christy's question. That's a tongue breaker for a non-native. About if I have to make the first offer, what all pointers do I need to keep in mind to make the first offer the best first offer? So in summary, everything we've said now, if you have to make the first offer, typically that's a good thing, because you want to go in, you want to have prepared. That means you want to have researched your numbers. You want to have your opening price, your target price, and your reservation price. You want to have gathered as many data points as you can, and then bluntly go ahead and make that first offer. Do not wait to be put in the defense until someone asks you what the first number is, but be confident about it and go ahead with it. That's my summary points. Anything we forgot to add?
We have a suggestion here. Instead of number, we can go for a range. And it sounds very logical and also understandable at one point, but knowing the anchoring effect right now, what do you think will counterpart here, the higher number or the smaller number, if you give the range? What do you think?
If you say to an employer, I'd like to make between 70 to 90,000, what are they going to hear?
We don't have an answer yet. 70.
Do others agree? If you go and want to buy something and
Yes.
the seller says this is going to cost you between $10 to $15, you're probably going to hear the 10.
The 10, absolutely.
So use a range, but be aware what end of it people are going to hear for your anchor. So you've got the thing you want to achieve, you've got to put at the lower or higher end if you're the buyer, depending on what they hear. Always ask for 20% of salary than you're earning now. That makes sense if you're staying in the same industry. Yes, that's a general rule of thumb. Okay, did we miss any questions? Anything else? I'm scrolling back up, but I think we've covered all of these. Okay, so, well, I guess then that was a quick last one. How does one deal with the following situation? While preparing numbers for an opening offer, if I decide on 40,000 as my opening, as per the prevailing prices, without knowing that the opposite party is willing to pay more than 40. Well, you should know that by now. No one wants to take it. If you've done your research, if you are in a position where you feel you should make an opening offer, you should not have that problem anymore. The fact that the other side would have offered you more than you wanted to ask for means you have not done your research, means you didn't get all the relevant information, means you should have never gone first in the first place. So as long as you're risking that they would have actually offered you more than you would ask for, then you're not in a situation where you should decide actually that you make a first offer. Then you should sip it and wait what they're saying, or do more research and get better numbers before you go in with your first offer. So yes, Aman's answer, don't make the first offer if that's a risk that you're running. Let the other side make it. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. It's great having you, great discussing. Maybe there's some salary negotiations coming up in the next couple of weeks. Let us know how these are going. We wish you all the best for all the next upcoming negotiations. We'll have another webinar on our last topic in about a week or 10 days. We'll let you know on the newsletter, and our social media. So old-fashioned, I know. And then looking forward to hearing from you again soon and seeing you next time. Stay safe, everyone. Take good care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye. Ciao.